Good morning and welcome to episode 49 of the Driller Newscast, a weekly update of the news and stories impacting the water and drilling industry. This week's episode is dedicated to geothermal and why the time is now to get involved. We'll talk about tax incentives and the reason why we're going for electrification. Jay Egg of Egg Geo, industry expert for all things geothermal, will guide us on what electrification and thermal networks are. We'll wrap this week's episode up with an interview with Expo Executive Director Jeff Hammond, who I caught up with at the huge AHR conference down in Atlanta last week. But before we get started, let's talk about the expectations of drilling a large-scale geothermal project. For this week's safety topic, let's talk about the expectations of drilling on a large-scale geothermal project. First and foremost, as we bid this, we need to consider our total recordable incident rate, TRIR, which is basically going to take your total number of incidents times 200,000 divided by the hours worked in that year. This is very important for us to understand our incidents and our safety policy. As we bid and win a large production geothermal, there's going to be many parties on site. It's going to be excavation companies and a general contractor and concrete. And just depending on the scope of the project, many parties involved, and we all have to be able to collaborate and work together safely. This isn't like showing up for that single hole residential water well project. We need to utilize high vis for those heavy traffic areas. Understanding that we need to be able to tape off and isolate our drilling area and the fall paths of our rods for any visitors or anybody that's coming up on top of us. On top of that, this is where safety is going to be a high profile expectation. Noise level of our rig. What is our hearing conservation program? Hard hats, steel-toed boots, gloves, the proper gloves, eye protection, the right tools, handmade tools and cheater bars. This is not the place for them. These are all the things that you need to start thinking about. Standard operating procedures for the best practices. How are we going to do hoisting, suspended loads? How will we pressure up those loops? These are all things that need to be discussed. What are we going to use for weight in order to get those loops to bottom? What is the expectations of disposal of cuttings and that added wear and tear? Not to mention the ergonomics of, are we pumping concrete or bentonite and sand? And how do our people move that around? Are we running bobcats, or is this going to be a job site that we have some sort of telehandler on? Powered industrial trucks training is going to be very important. Are people having their OSHA 10, possibly their OSHA 30? All part of the safety policy and the expectations of our people being competent individuals on all things construction industry. And that's 1926, though rigs fall under 1910 general industry all the time. When we get on this large scale construction project, you got to believe it. The investigations, the way things will turn out, it's going to be 1926. This is just the start of a primer, and we can get much deeper into this in a full discussion, but you better have a safety policy. You better understand your job hazard analysis, your job safety analysis, standard operating procedures. How will our people come in and out of the site every day? How do we handle the people we're working with, the other companies there, and the neighbors? These are all very important. It's a good place to start. What are your SOPs? What is your job safety analysis? And do you know your TRIR? Good luck. All right, drillers, it's time. The Residential Clean Energy Property Credit is a 30% credit for qualified expenditures made by a taxpayer for residential energy efficient properties. There's plenty of tax incentives for commercial properties and nonprofits, and it just continues to expand. The IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, extended the residential clean energy property credit through 2034. They've modified the credit and percentage rates and added battery storage technology as an eligible expenditure. This credit applies for properties placed into service after December 31st, 2021 and before January 1st, 2033. It's not going away. This isn't like when the bubble popped the last time. There is plenty of incentives, and I guarantee we'll have more hard work as we hit 2030 and we see how all of this has impacted our carbon emissions. It's going to be huge. In the middle of February, the Treasury Department, the U.S. Department of Energy, and the Internal Revenue Services released information on key provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act to incentivize investments in underserved communities and hard-hit coal communities. Big money. The Inflation Reduction Act provided $10 billion in new funding for a qualifying advanced energy project credit program. In the Inflation Reduction Act, Congress required that at least $4 billion be reserved for projects in communities with closed coal mines or retired coal-fired power plants. These Inflation Reduction Act credits will help revitalize and strengthen the nation's energy economy and infrastructure while ensuring underserved and historic energy communities are not left behind. This came from Deputy Secretary of Energy, David M. Turk. The qualifying advanced energy project credit will reinvigorate our clean energy supply chains, while the low-income communities bonus credit for the investment tax encourages clean energy businesses to make targeted investments that will deliver on a more equitable energy transition. Here's the deal, everybody. The studies have proven that residential heat pumps reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 38% and the minimum, and that's over a gas furnace. Residential heat pumps reduce 20-year global warming potential emissions by a minimum of 50%. Energy efficient construction reduces overall emissions for heat pumps and furnaces, meaning the smarter we are about building our homes, and that 30% tax credit talks about being able to use insulation, better windows, better doors. But when we add in geothermal, that percent emission reduction lowers even more for that entire home parameters. 20 to 30% of our entire country's electric grid goes to heating and cooling homes. This is where we're going with the discussion about electrification and thermal networks. And that's why we're going to go back and we're going to revisit a discussion I had with Jay Egg last year, where he's going to simply explain electrification to us and the importance of thermal networks. That's drilling big loop fields that communities can share. And we just saw just last week that Vermont announced a collaboration with a large utility company in being able to take old infrastructure and turn it into a thermal network amongst buildings. There's lots of drilling to be done in green spaces and football fields and residential homes, and we need as many drillers as possible. So we're bringing back industry subject matter expert Jay Egg of Egg Geo to explain to us electrification and thermal networks.
Electrification, first of all, it's important to understand that electrification basically is saying all of our buildings are going to use only electricity as a driving energy source for the heating, cooling, and hot water systems. It's basically the same as saying decarbonizing, stopping the burning of fossil fuels on site. So what it means for our buildings is we can only get air conditioning, heating, and hot water one of two other ways. One of the ways is to put in air source heat pumps, which have those condensers on the roof or outside the building, or to put in geothermal heat pumps, which require typically boreholes. 90% of geothermal systems use boreholes on site. So that's what electrification means for drillers. And the reason why we have the two different types of heat pump systems is because one is the less expensive and more temporary way to do it, and the other provides a permanent infrastructure and a permanent installation and does something very important that goes into the electrification explanation. It takes our buildings and keeps them from peaking dramatically like we saw in Texas winter before last, where the grid gets this huge spike of energy consumption because all the heaters come on at once and draw too much energy. And that's why our governments in the United States and throughout the world are so interested in geothermal, because it flattens the spike. Whatever we see in our air conditioning peak demand in the summertime, which our cities can handle now because we're already air conditioning our cities for the most part, will be equivalent to the wintertime peak demand. So in looking at this, the geothermal is really the only solution, because as we were talking about off camera a few minutes ago, we can either spend $1 trillion for a city or a state upgrading the electrical infrastructure to handle what they will need to fully electrify, or we can spend half or less of that and invest in our drillers and our boreholes and our thermal energy networks and give everybody that permanent infrastructure and start piping thermal energy around to our buildings from geothermal loop fields. So a thermal energy network looks a lot like a water main system through a city, or even you could compare it to a natural gas main. It's a pipeline that runs along to and provides service to every building in a city or a municipality. But this pipeline, instead of moving just fresh water or just natural gas, which is there for creating combustion heat, it provides thermal energy exchange that feeds heat pumps and chillers inside the building.
And so I've seen some of the schematics, and they show using water from subways in
Yes.
different places. You know, we're drillers, and this is a big industry to us, and we like putting in geothermal boreholes. This sounds like something that would take away from that.
And you know what? That's what we've done here is, in a very big picture, if I were a driller, I would think exactly what you just said, because it looks like we're taking boreholes off of the on-site, one set of boreholes per building. And indeed we are. Instead of having, it'd be kind of like, imagine this, if you had, think about when everybody first started drilling wells to get water and putting septic tanks in their yard because they have plumbing. Well, eventually we migrated from that and we started using water mains and water departments and wastewater. And so it took those boreholes or those water wells out of each and every location. So that's what we're doing here. And while we are using existing moving water infrastructure, such as subways that are dewatering, basements that are dewatering, and using that energy, what it really comes down to is our peak load, which is always going to be in the summer, and most people don't realize that, is still going to have to be satisfied. So all that energy needs to be pumped out of these city centers, and it's going to end up going into, just like, imagine any university project you've ever seen, whether it was done by Northwest Geothermal or MEP Associates or whatever company, they would do a college campus. They don't do the boreholes right at each building. Rather, they pick a field, a green field, and they put in thousands of boreholes. That's what's actually going to happen in these cities. So in New York City, where you have every high school has a football field, right? suddenly those football fields are going to become bore fields. So will the parks. So will any green space where we can actually put in these boreholes. So the number of boreholes that will go in, I don't know whether it will be more or less, but put it this way, it's going to be more than the current number of drillers can even begin to handle over the next 30 years, if not the next 60 years.
For our feature this week, I sat down with Jeff Hammond, Executive Director of the International Ground Source Heat Pump Association, to talk about the importance of why he was at the largest heating, cooling, refrigerant conference in the country that brought together engineers and manufacturers and designers and drillers. And it's such a fun conference to go and wander and learn about. And he was there talking to IGSPA members, talking to heat pump manufacturers, and advocating for IGSPA and why we should all be part of it. So I hope you enjoy my discussion with Jeff Hammond. Good afternoon from Monday, the start of the AHR 2023 conference in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was lucky enough to catch up with this busy guy right here, Jeff Hammond, Executive Director of IGSPA. What are you doing here?
Oh, I'm trying to see as many IGSPA members as I can, Brock. It's an exciting time for our industry, a lot going on, and it's hard to get around to everybody, but lots of good conversations.
Good. Last time I talked to you was just before NGWA IGSPA conference. Mm-hmm. How did that turn out?
Turned out great. We had about 50% more attendees as the previous year, and a lot more participation with drillers. We had good conversations about the geothermal heat pump industry and what's happening and all the exciting changes in legislation, tax credits, so forth.
How did you feel about the attendance for Vegas?
Vegas was really surprising. NGWA had great attendance, which helped us out, and we had, like I said, 50% more than Nashville. So we were really happy with it. We're partnering again this year with NGWA, and we're expecting even better.
Now tell me, outside of us catching up in the big December show,
right?
You have monthly town halls going on.
We do.
Tell us about them.
Yeah, we try to have a topic every month in the town hall that would be a good learning experience for members, and we draw from all kinds of different speakers, residential, commercial, different inventions, new technology, those kind of things. Definitely want to concentrate on ground loops and learning, and then we have a Dig Deeper webinar, which is a little bit more technical, and that's also once a month. So we try to have 2 sessions every month. And we've had really good attendance and results from those webinars.
So obviously our big theme for 2023 for the Driller magazine,
right? And
I feel like as for IGSPA and everybody is, we need more drillers.
We do. We would like to see water well drillers and seismic drillers and oil and gas drillers, you name it. There's a lot of opportunity in the geothermal industry right now for drilling. And it's just going to continue to increase, especially with some of the new incentives that are available. Even nonprofits now will qualify for payments. And that would mean that we have opportunities to upgrade our schools and other nonprofits like that. So we're excited to work with drillers as much as we can.
What do you think the holdback is right now?
I think it's just a change in the way you do business, from a day-to-day basis. Our industry really doesn't use those resources much differently, but it is, you're not looking for water, you're just drilling a hole. And so that changes how you set up your rig and how you use your manpower and so forth. But I think it's just a matter of, dipping your foot in to see what is the future. And not that we want to take away from water wells, obviously, people still need water wells drilled, but we'd like to at least have some drillers check it out, see what it's all about. I think they'll find a good business model working on the geothermal side.
So what's interesting, only about 13% of our population has a water well.
Yeah.
However, when you look at homeowners and homes, for rural water systems, commercial water systems, 80% of the population has water piped to them somewhere.
Right.
So if I'm a driller, I can drill one water well at one home, where I could start drilling all the homes.
Well, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there. And this, right now we have this sort of chicken and the egg thing. It's hard to have enough business to be able to stay in your geographic area. But as we start to grow, there will be whole subdivisions that need to be drilled. There'll be commercial jobs that need to be drilled. And so those are some of the things that are big opportunities. If water well drillers can take a look at that, especially gear up for what's coming, then you're right. There's just a whole lot of potential there for expansion and new business that they might not have otherwise.
I think a big piece that we could learn more from in the industry is we need to develop the next generation in HVAC, in geothermal, in water well, in construction.
That's right.
The nice thing about ground source geothermal from a commercial project to a residential home is there's repetition.
Yes.
A water well, why we have the art of water well is because it changes so rapidly from this county to the next county. Sure. Where if I could get a good young man or woman on a platform and let them drill 4 holes in a row in similar subsurface, that muscle memory, it's we train the way we fight, or we fight the way we train.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a huge opportunity there. And, so many people are retiring in our industry. So there's certainly job security. If we have young people looking at careers, this is a great opportunity to look at something that's sustainable, long-term, and you can be very inventive in the way you change your business. Maybe it's a family-owned business, and they've done a great job over the years, but they have an opportunity to try something different and maybe make that more sustainable for generation to generation. So that's something that might change some attitudes.
Sustainable is such the perfect word. We need all green energies. So solar and wind are also important. However, geothermal is subsurface.
Right.
We can redevelop that green space into a urban farm, or we can redevelop that space into a baseball field or a parking lot.
Indeed.
Or there's just endless opportunities of us utilizing the earth as a battery.
Right.
And not taking up precious real estate.
Right.
And that's something that I really think we need to be talking to our state officials and our national officials about. Is it's proven technology.
It is.
And we still have that precious land to do something else with.
Well, indeed. And in fact, there are a lot of applications where the ground loops are underneath the building. So now we're not really taking up any real estate. And then we have opportunities for energy piles. We have combination systems where we might have networked geothermal. So it's almost endless. As we grow as an industry, we're going to see even more of those types of changes. Today, where we have one home in a rural area, that's a great application, obviously, especially if you only have a choice of propane or electric. But moving forward, as we move into more urban and suburban areas, now that the rules just completely change and the density of work increases. So now drillers are going to have the opportunity to set up a rig or multiple rigs, and their bang for the buck is just much, much better. So there's a lot of opportunity if we can position our industry to get ready for that growth.
It's very interesting. I live in Michigan, and there's a big debate over Line 5 in Enbridge going through the Mackinac Straits, right? Sure. However, the Upper Peninsula is propane. We're either going to truck it across the Mackinac Bridge, bring it in from Wisconsin, or we find something else that's sustainable.
Yeah.
And growing up in rural West Michigan, we didn't have natural gas pipelines. We had propane. Right. And it was a very big financial hit for my family. Yeah. And you look at our extreme weather from, again, in Michigan, it was -8 degrees and now it's 45.
Right.
And if we can keep that constant temperature, these are the things as the drilling industry we think about. It's full circle, and energy consumption, heating and cooling, water sustainability, it's a no-brainer.
Really.
Geothermal and water wells are combined regardless if we want them to be or not.
Well, in fact, in Michigan, as you mentioned, we have quite a lot of geothermal systems that use the water directly. The water quality is good, and so in a lot of cases, there's opportunity there, to use that water well, not only for potable water, but also for heating and cooling. We can't do that everywhere because of poor water quality in some areas, but yeah, there's all kinds of different ways that we can make this technology work for us. And if we're comparing to propane, that's not going to get any cheaper. So at some point we have to make that decision. What are we going to do long term?
Absolutely. So what's the big push for the first quarter for Expo?
Training is definitely our big push. We've had good success at the conference. We have all of our committees reactivated. We have some subcommittees on our training committee, and we've involved all the stakeholders. So we have quite a bit of work to do on redoing some of our current curriculum and creating some new curriculum that's more modular in approach, so that if you're a driller and you just need this portion of the training, you're not going through that entire 3 days. We're going to make it more custom to what you need from a workforce development standpoint. So we really have a full court press on training coming up. And then, of course, we have our town halls and Dig Deeper webinars you mentioned, and conferences December 5th through the 7th in Vegas again. So the year will go quickly.
So if I'm a water well driller, and you got quite a few of them right now watching us.
Right.
How do we get them to join?
Well, they can join easily by either going on the website and looking for membership. There's some information on there about the different types of membership. They're certainly welcome to contact us directly. It's an easy email to remember. It's info@expo.org. So feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to answer any questions. What's great about joining now is we have a brand new directory. So for drillers who want more visibility, there's an interactive map. You just click on the state and go through and look for the type of business that you're seeking out, and you're going to be right up there on the list. So it'll be easier for potential customers to find you, but also to network. If you're looking for a contractor that you want to work with, for example, they're going to be listed, and your profile just gets higher as you're listed on that directory.
I think it's really important to think about, from the days when my father started doing geothermal in the 90s to the 2000s to now, the technology, the price point, there's so many aspects. And this is what this amazing conference, drillers, you got to come down and see this conference, all the tools and everything going on, the ability to collaborate with the manufacturers and the engineers and the HVAC companies. But this price point has come down. The Inflation Reduction Act has reduced the cost. There's a huge push and initiative, not only in New York, but across the country. And it's not just for heating dominant systems anymore. Geothermal is very efficient and is being utilized in Arizona and the arid desert and many places. And this is the time. If you want to diversify your business, it's now.
It really is. Now's the opportunity. We're not going the other direction. It's definitely going up for sure.
I'm excited. It's I can't even contain the opportunities that we're going to see from now to 2030 and beyond.
Right.
You not only get to provide water for families, which is one of our most precious resources, but you also get to help fight climate change and help our electric grid. I mean, that's the biggest battle to this, is we can either put $1 trillion into an electric grid, or we can put a bunch of money into geothermal networks, geothermal heat pumps, get ourselves off this fossil fuel dependence, and become a better climate and better country.
That's a really good point. And in fact, the ground loop is your energy resource. You either pay for it in propane tanks, or you pay for it and put it in the ground, then it stays for the life of that home. In fact, it probably will last longer than that home in most cases. So now it's in addition to your property. If you sell that house, you're selling an additional energy lot, so to speak. So now's the time to do it. We definitely would love to interact with drillers as much as we can, and if we can be of any help along those lines, we're happy to help.
And just like Garen Eubanks said last year on the Newscast, it's -8 outside, or it is a nice temperate 50 degrees in the ground. You make the decision.
Right. Indeed. Yeah, that constant temperature makes all the difference.
Thank you, Jeff. It's
Thank
been
you,
a
Brock.
pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You got to make it down to the AHR conference and just check out. Next year, it's in Chicago. This is very important to us. Come collaborate and be part of the engineers and the HVAC and the manufacturers, and let's get the drilling industry super energized into this. Now is the time. Thank you.
Thanks, Brock.
Thank you for joining us for episode 49 of the Driller Newscast. It's a lot of exciting things going on right now, and we paused from all of the talk about the drought and everything happening out west to talk some geothermal. Next week, we drop episode 50 of the Driller Newscast, and it's going to be an exciting episode. I don't want to ruin the surprise, so you're just going to have to come back and see it. But hey, get involved in ground source geothermal. Get involved with abandoning orphan wells and what they're doing to tap those into geothermal. Get involved in drilling for geothermal and making our planet a better place. We have in April, the New York Geo Conference happening in Albany. I went last year. It was an amazing time. Expo will be again back in Vegas with the National Groundwater Conference. Find your local geothermal consortium association. There's many out there. Get involved. This is a great way to diversify your business. It's a great way to train young drillers, and it's just as important as us providing water. And here's the difference. 13% of the population has private water wells. Think about what the percent of the population that requires geothermal to be able to make us a more sustainable country. Have a great week. Thanks, everybody.